Today, I'll attempt to tenure my terroristic tirade of seeing how many cards I can jam into a 2-card combo and still sell you on the fact that it's a 2-card combo. Today I think we can get up to 4. So in a previous video, I broke down some of the common A plus Bs of cEDH, which is card for man, win the game. And today we're going to focus on A plus B plus C, which is card for man, commander, win the game. Specifically a subset of this, which is an infinite mana loop, and then a commander that'll win the game with infinite mana, because that's an incredibly common strategy in cEDH. But before we get into that, I do need to clarify once again what I like to refer to as a common game piece, a mana positive rock, a creature, something you can reasonably expect to have access to by the time that you start to go for a combo. And I don't include common game pieces into the card count of a combo. So yes, some of these 2-card combos will require more than 2 cards. And if you can't forgive me for that, at least we're all on the same page before we dive into it. Now, in the A plus B video, I had to constantly drag you over to the demonstration table to show you how these loops work. That's not going to be as necessary today. A couple of the infinite mana loops in this game are incredibly straightforward and can just be explained right here on the couch in a couple of sentences, but we are going to have to kick things off over at the demonstration table so that I can show you some of the most common ways that people like to loop through everybody's favorite little goblin, Docside Extortionist. Just in case you're unfamiliar, Docside Extortionist makes a treasure for each artifact and enchantments your opponents control. And if me constantly referring to mana rocks as common game pieces wasn't enough of a hint, Docside can get pretty unwieldy in cEDH. The number of treasures that you'll make is often referred to as the Docside count, and each combo requires a different Docside count. The most consistently efficient is going to be Emil the Blessed, who requires a Docside count of 4. Emil allows you to pay 3 mana to blink any creature you control, so the combo is sort of as follows. Cast Docside, make 4 treasures, cast Emil, use 3 of the treasures to blink Docside, which will make 4 treasures, use 3, blink Docside, make 4, cast, spend 3, blink, make 4, so on and so forth until you have infinite treasures. This is an incredibly safe version of it, as you kind of get to play around Mindbreak Trap, which a lot of the other ones don't, and so you don't run that risk of sort of getting interrupted on your first or second iteration of the loop. Now, unfortunately for Emil, the big drawback is that they have this useless triggered ability that is green, so they're technically a green-white card. So if you can't splurge for the white, then your next best backup is going to be Temur Sabertooth, which allows you to pay 2 to return a creature you control to your hand. This combo is going to require a Docside count of 5, and it's very similar. You cast Docside, you make 5 treasures, you cast Temur Sabertooth, spend 2 treasures to bounce the Docside, use 2 treasures to cast the Docside, you have netted 1 treasure, bounce Docside, play Docside, you're up another treasure, so on and so forth to infinity. And if you're really desperate, you can do this with Baron Master Wizard, who is going to require a Docside count of 6, because Baron allows you to pay 2 mana and sacrifice a permanent to bounce a creature, which means you'll need to sacrifice 3 treasures to actually activate the ability, 2 for the mana cost, 1 to fulfill the condition of sacrificing a permanent. So, just like always, we Docside, we make 6 treasures, we cast Baron, we spend 3 treasures to bounce Docside, replay Docside, get 6 treasures, bounce Docside, replay Docside, 6 treasures. Again, like just slowly incrementing up on the Docside count. The final one, another card I don't own, is Cloudstone Curio. Cloudstone Curio says whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you can bounce another permanent of the same type. Luckily, at least one of your commanders is almost certainly going to be a creature, but the Docside count necessary for this combo is completely dependent on that second creature. It's going to be X plus 3, where X is the CMC of the creature you want to loop with Docside. So however expensive that second creature is, you need 3 more than that. For an example of maximum efficiency, we're going to say that Rograk, Son of Roga, is one of your commanders. So put them over in the command zone here, Cloudstone Curio up here, cast Docside, make 3 treasures, cast Rograk. That is going to allow us to bounce Docside, use 2 of the treasures to play Docside. It's going to get us 3. That's going to bounce Rograk. Cast Rograk, bounce Docside, cast Docside, bounce Rograk. And as long as you're just putting your commander back into your hand, then this loop is pretty straightforward. And this can be done in mono red because it just requires the Docside and an artifact. For our second combo, we're going to get a little bit more specific with just one of my favorite cards in the format. There's something that really got me into cEDH in Food Chain. Food Chain is a 3-mana enchantment that allows you to exile a creature you control to get its CMC plus 1 of any color of mana to cast creature spells. You are going to combo this with one of 3 creatures that can be cast from exile: Squee the Immortal, Eternal Scourge, and Misthollow Griffin. For the purposes of this example, we'll use Squee. So you have Food Chain in play, you have Squee in play, you exile Squee for 4 mana, you cast him for 3, exile him for 4, cast him for 3. You're netting 1 red mana each time. Once you have infinite red mana, then you can make infinite mana of all of the other colors. This is going to combo with any commander that can win the game by being cast an infinite number of times. The most popular ones being Rocco, Cabaret Caterer, Atraxa Grand Unifier, and Corvold, Fakehurst King. In the case of Atraxa, you're going to cast Atraxa, draw some number of cards, exile Atraxa to Food Chain, redirect them to the command zone, cast them again, draw like 4 more cards, so on and so forth until you've drawn your entire library, and then win the game with something like Thassa's Oracle. In the case of Rocco, similar story, right? Cast Rocco, tutor out a combo piece, exile Rocco to Food Chain, redirect to command zone, cast Rocco, tutor combo piece, win the game with the combo. Corvold's a little more convoluted, as you need to like cast the Squee, cast the Corvold, sack the Squee to draw a card, cast the Squee from Graveyard, because Squee is the one that can be cast from Grave or Exile. Exile Corvold to Food Chain, bring him back in, sack the Squee again, draw a card, draw your entire library, and then win the game, likely through some kind of Mayhem Devil loop. And I really like this combo because creature spells are notoriously difficult to interact with on the stack. A lot of players are really only using like Force of Will and Pact of Negation for something like that. And you're actually, despite the fact that you are creating an infinite storm count, you're pretty invulnerable to something like Mindbreak Trap, because your creatures can be cast from exile. Your commander can be redirected to the command zone if they're exiled off the stack by the Mindbreak Trap. And so it's just a really cool kind of thing. I like casting my commander an infinite number of times, drawing through my entire library. It's really cool. But that is that combo, relatively straightforward. And now I'm going to go ahead and change out the whiteboard for an even more straightforward combo. Kinnan Basalt Monolith is incredibly goofy to me because it's close to being an A+C, but it's also infinitely far away. Kinnan says when you tap a non-land permanent for mana, create 1 additional mana of the type that permanent produced. And Basalt Monolith, very straightforward, is a rock that taps for 3 mana and also untaps for 3 mana. So with Kinnan in play, you will make 4 mana and untap for 3 mana. So make infinite colorless mana. Kinnan, on the other hand, is limited to the amount of green and blue mana that you can produce in order to actually spin through your deck. So instead, we are going to main deck this combo with another Simic commander, Thrasios, who will allow you to pay 4 mana to draw a card. So again, draw through your entire library. That's really it. It's just Kinnan Basalt Monolith, infinite colorless, Thrasios, draw your entire library. Very straightforward. This is also sometimes less popularly done with Power Artifact, which reduces the ability cost of an artifact. So effectively, Basalt Monolith will tap for 3 and untap for 2 if you're using Power Artifact, though this is sort of the easier and more common way to do it, as Kinnan is just a very good value piece for producing more mana off of your rocks, because again, cEDH is a very rock-heavy format. But if you're looking for another way to make infinite mana in blue, then you actually need to follow me over to the demonstration table so I can show you how Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant loops work. This combo is one of my favorites, but it's pretty weird in its execution, so we're actually going to need 2 common game pieces for this one, but you only need 1 specific card in either Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant, because these cards share a line of text that says whenever you cast a spell, return target permanent to its owner's hand, with Hullbreaker Horror having a stipulation that you cannot bounce lands. But you only actually need 1 of these cards to execute the loop, so we'll go ahead and use Hullbreaker Horror, and then you need 2 mana rocks. For the purposes of the first example, we'll use Mana Crypt and Soul Ring, because they're pretty iconic, and it's pretty straightforward. You can even have one of these in play to begin with. You get your Hullbreaker Horror into play. You tap this for 2 colorless mana, you play the Mana Crypt, you bounce this, you tap this for 2 colorless mana, you cast this, you bounce this, you tap this, you cast this, you bounce this, you tap. You get the idea. And so it's really easy to make infinite colorless mana with this combo, and that's why you'll constantly see it in Thrasios lists. It's also in Kinnan, which is like 25% of Thrasios list anyway. There are ways to make infinite colored mana with it. If you had Mana Crypt Arcane Signet, that would work, right? You can make whatever colors your commander identity is, but if you had like Soul Ring Arcane Signet, then it doesn't work because it costs 3 mana to play these rocks, and they only generate 3 mana. So you have to be a little bit careful about what rocks you're actually looking to execute the combo with. Talismans, again, they're not going to go infinite in terms of like colored mana, but you can make an arbitrarily large amount of mana, equal to a little bit less than your life total. So you really just kind of need to think about like, what kind of mana do I need? How much of that mana do I actually need? Because most combos don't actually require infinite mana, right? Thrasios drawing your entire library on turn 2, I think is like 356 or 360 mana. A stone's throw away from infinite. Another thing I just want to remind everyone of is that for loops like this, Mox Diamond won't work, because if you don't sacrifice a land, then or if you don't discard a land, I don't know why I keep saying sacrifice, then Mox Diamond sacrifices itself. But with Chrome Mox, you can choose not to imprint anything. And so if you just had out, for example, this Mana Crypt, then you can tap it, play Chrome Mox, imprinting nothing to bounce the Mana Crypt. use the Mana Crypt to bounce the Chrome Mox, and still make infinite mana that way. You just kind of have to be a little bit careful, sort of in the deck building process, about why you would include this combo. Again, very simple for Thrasios lists, but it's very difficult to use this to make something like Woogbur, and so like Sisay would never run something like this, right? They would have to focus on a Dockside loop, because for the most part, this is going to just be a colorless infinite mana combo. And just like with the A plus B combos, 4 is really all that you're going to see in terms of commonality. So now I want to talk about some of the honorable mentions, some of the less common ones, some of the backup plans that some of these decks are going to utilize. The first one being Devoted Druid and Swift Reconfiguration. It's incredibly straightforward. Devoted Druid can tap for a green mana and untap by putting a -0/-1 counter on it, and Swift Reconfiguration just makes it so that it's not a creature anymore, and you can put any number of -0/-1 counters on it and it won't die, so you can sit there and wave at your opponent as you make infinite green mana. The second one is World Gorger Dragon Necromancy, pretty popular in stuff like Timna Jeska, and really just a cool infinite mana combo for non-green, non-blue players. This one sounds complicated, but I promise it's straightforward. World Gorger Dragon, when it enters the battlefield, exiles all of your other permanents, and then when it leaves the battlefield, it returns all of those permanents to play. Necromancy reanimates World Gorger Dragon and attaches to it, and if Necromancy leaves play, World Gorger Dragon dies again. So, Necromancy, the World Gorger Dragon, all of your permanents leave play, World Gorger dies, Necromancy comes back in, reanimates World Gorger, which exiles Necromancy, it dies, comes back in, right? You see the loop? Now, World Gorger Dragon exiles all of your permanents, which means every time you're doing this, all of your lands are returning to play untapped, and so you can tap them for mana before they get exiled to the World Gorger Dragon, and repeat this until you have infinite mana, and then cast Jeska and kill the table. The last one is Auriok Salvagers and Lion's Eye Diamond, which again, pretty straightforward. Lion's Eye Diamond simply sacrifices itself to make 3 mana of any color and discards your hand, and Auriok Salvagers can pay 2 mana to return an artifact with a CMC 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand, so you make 3 white mana, you use 2 of it to return the LED to hand, you play it, you sack it, you make 3 white mana, you play it again after you've returned it to your hand, do this until you have infinite white, and then you can make infinite mana of every color. And now we get to the real point of this video, which is my tirade about this combo specifically. First of all, if you've ever heard of Bomberman combo, this is what they're talking about. And if you, like me, when you were first getting into Magic the Gathering, you looked at all these primers and you saw all these things mentioning Bomberman combo and you had no idea what they were talking about, because like a reasonable person, you looked for the card in the deck called Bomberman or something that looked remotely like Bomberman, and you couldn't find anything. Turns out, back in the age of the fucking dinosaurs, in some constructed format, people played this combo with Pyrite Spellbomb as the win condition. Well, guess what? Now we have commanders that win the game with infinite mana, and we don't need to call it Bomberman combo anymore. So if you're as frustrated about this as I was, I understand you. It's Bomberman combo, though. This is what they're talking about. Number 2. I love Thrasios, and when I was first looking into 4-color Thrasios, I saw Thrasios Vial Smasher, and I was like, okay, that looks pretty cool. And then they were playing the Underworld Breach loops, and I was like, okay, this just kind of seems like bad blue farm with green in it, but whatever. Then I look over at the white-red Thrasios decks, and I see that they're not playing the Underworld Breach loops, even though now in blue-green-white, or blue-white-red, we have access to the intuition that turns this into an A plus B combo. And I thought, wow, why aren't they playing that? Because if you play it in Bruce Thrasios, then you also get access to the Auriok Salvagers. And so your Breach line now takes the useless Lion's Eye Diamond and gives you an additional combo with it. Sure, it's not safe, but we're not playing for safety here. We're playing a turbo format. And so I always thought it was really weird that the shitty deck that didn't have intuition access played the combo, and then the deck that does have intuition access doesn't play the combo, even though they can then just play Bomberman combo for 1 more card, because all you need is infinite mana and you can win the game with Thrasios. And then I noticed that there are some people that are on the same page as me, and they're not playing Bruce, because Bruce doesn't do anything anyway, and we're not trying to neoform into a Seedborn Muse. They're playing the other dude whose name I can't even remember because he's really bad. And that's the problem with 4-color Thrasios. You have to play a really bad commander alongside him, unless you play Timna, but then you don't have access to Dockside, which is like the whole point of playing shit like Finale of Devastation is to go get a Dockside. And it's been a very frustrating experience for me as a Thrasios player to try and find that healthy middle ground. But yeah, this whole video was actually just a ruse so that I could say that publicly, because I'm mad about it. Anyway, that has been A plus B plus C combos, specifically infinite mana combos in cEDH. The most common ones, some honorable mentions, and fucking Bomberman combo too. We'll talk about more Magic stuff on the channel continuously, so stick around. Subscribe. That's the end of a video. How do you end a video? I'm just going to turn it off.